Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, bringing you another deep dive this week. This week, we're looking at World Cup stats from Victory Road's World Cup. This is probably the largest, I would say, event going on right now, and having no real data before Worlds felt awkward. And so we're going to kind of look at this and kind of make some inferences about what our Worlds meta could be and how you can better prepare for it going to London. Before we get started on all that, make sure to do all that fun YouTube stuff for us. Like, comment, subscribe, comment down below. Are you going to Worlds? I would like to know. We have just a little under over 2 weeks. So I would like to know if you're going to Worlds either as a player, as a spectator. I personally won't be making the trip because I have an adult life and I have to be here. But to those of you who do get to go, good luck, have fun. It should be a fantastic experience, and hopefully we'll get to do more of this stuff in the future. So Victor Road was kind enough to share these usage stats with us via Twitter. Definitely go check out at VGC Victory Road on Twitter, their Twitch channel, Victory Road VGC, YouTube Victory Road VGC. They are super duper nice about sharing this kind of stuff with the public, and you get to kind of look at this stuff. And it's kind of interesting to see that nothing's really changed in the month and a half, 2 months, or whatever it is that between the last big event and the start of Worlds. Incineroar, Zacian, Kyogre, all still really popular. Rillaboom, Grimmsnarl, Regieleki, Thundurus. Like, this feels like everything I talked about back in the start of May and June. But there's a couple other cool things that have started to tick up and tick down respectively. The big ones, since this is World Cup, this is a global meta more so than a regional meta like we're used to seeing for NA, EU, Oceania, Australia, whatever. And so we'll see a lot of unique things that are unique to certain regions be popular because that's just what was played at the time. Conversely, we'll see a lot of things that are normally popular, especially in A, that aren't as popular right now. And as we kind of go through these, we'll look at win rates and see how they're doing, how they're faring, and kind of talk about some of that stuff. The first big one that pops out to me is the lack of like Trick Room and how poorly it's doing now. Calyrex Ice Palkia was something that was very highly rated, that was praised for how powerful it is, and it's now like just barely above 40% win rate, which isn't great, especially if you're going into a big event like Worlds. Part of the reason why I think Trick Room is just not doing too well anymore is just like the Lunaludon teams are very good into it. Being able to just click Moongeist Beam, click Meteor Beam, have a good answer for Palkia, it really puts a damper on what the Trick Room team's trying to do. And because these teams are bulkier now, you're able to kind of stall out those Trick Room turns a little bit. And if you can stall out the first Trick Room and prevent the second one from going up, you're in a much better position compared to being a hyper offensive team trying to fight under Trick Room. Speaking of Trick Room, along those same lines, Porygon has a 38% win rate, which is also really low. Porygon 2 has been something that had been popularized for a little while and had been doing really well, and now all of a sudden it's just fallen off a cliff. It's just not, apparently it's just not usable anymore, not viable. I'm not sure what is leading to Porygon 2's downfall right now. I know there's certain things that you can have a problem with, like Charizard, Giant Gigantamax can be a problem. If you can just get bopped easily by like a good double up. But overall, I don't think there's any like really hard counters to Porygon 2 running around right now. I think it's just a lot of hate from the same things that are stopping the Trick Room teams from winning. Going the other direction, talking about the super fast stuff, Tornadus has a 62% win rate, alongside Whimsicott here at 56%. Our very fast Tailwind stuff is doing really well again. And that's not surprising so much, seeing how much Trick Room has fallen down here, but seeing that like Tornadus, I believe, has the highest win rate of all the Pokemon at 62, and still has a decent usage stat behind it. And that's really important to note here, is a high usage stat and a high win rate means that the Pokemon right now is doing well. Landorus is that same boat, 14% usage, 58% win rate. Looking over here in the top 10, the only thing that gets kind of close to that in win rate style is Venusaur and Kyogre at 40% usage, 55%, and 19% and 55% respectively. Um, those are really good numbers for a Pokemon that had notoriously not been wanted to see play, because Kyogre is really really good into it, right? Um, so it's interesting to see that Landorus and Tornadus are starting to trend again and trend popular as in this situation, conversely to Trick Room eating it and kicking it down the road. Let's talk Weather Wars here a little bit too, because we have Kyogre versus Groudon stats here. Kyogre has about almost double the usage Groudon does, and still has a very high win rate in comparison to Groudon. I think part of that is it's easier to play a Kyogre team than it is to play a good Sun team. Sun teams kind of are all over the place right now and really struggle against Kyogre plus other stuff, right? That's always been the push and pull here is you got to find the Sun team that beats Kyogre, but you also have to be able to beat other things in the meta. And if you focus so hard on beating Kyogre, but you can't beat other stuff, you drop games at other places. I also think Sun suffers a lot from just the from the just whole like lottery style play. You have to hit your Precipice Blades, you have to hit your Sleep Powders, you have to hit Meteor Beam if you're Lunala, you have to do all these, make sure you hit all these checks, and it's a much harder team to play optimally because there's just a chance that you just don't do something on a turn because you missed your move, and then your opponent just gets to crack back with a Water Spout, Behemoth Blade, something that's going to be guaranteed damage into your team, and you could just lose a Pokemon that way. Um, Personally, that's why I'm not a big fan of the Sun archetypes outside of like the more consistent variants with like AV Groudon and Charizard. Being able to have a backup plan of I need consistency is always a good thing, especially going into a large event like Worlds. The other restricteds we haven't really talked about here, Calyrex Shadow doing fairly well for itself. Only a 40% win rate seems kind of low, but I think that's more due to the fact that it's just being paired with Groudon more instead of like Zacian or other strong pairings. And so it can kind of suffer from I can't bring this Pokemon because I have this archetype with me. Does that make sense? Like you bring if it's on your Groudon team, you're bringing Calyrex Shadow Groudon a lot of the time, and you can't really always bring Calyrex because you need all of the sun support and whatnot because you have Groudon. So it kind of suffers in that regard a little bit, but overall it's still trending upwards. It's still doing well. It's still a strong pick. I just think that people have figured out how to beat this like Calyrex Shadows consistently now, and so it's going to be much harder to play going forward. There's also Yveltal here, which is surprisingly doing really well, even though it's trending downwards. This might be a situation of the people who are playing Yveltal are just winning more and are just better, maybe just better players, have better matchups, because 12% in the sea of this World Cup isn't a lot. It's getting pretty low in my opinion, but a 55% win rate is something you can't really argue with and tell it no, you can't really play it, because 55% is on par with Venusaur, on par with Kyogre. It's better than Rillaboom, better than Grimmsnarl. And I think as people are gravitating away from electric types being the focus of their teams and more towards like Rillaboom and Venusaur and Amoonguss being grass types, Yveltal is going to get better as that progresses. Now, going into Worlds, that has the chance to flip right back on its head again, and we might see nothing but Thundurus and Regieleki as far as the eye can see. However, Yveltal still is fine into those matchups, and you have certain ways to beat them, especially if you're playing like Yveltal Groudon, Yveltal Landorus, something that's going to be a good check into those electric types, and or Thundurus. That brings us to these restricted pair usage stats that they shared, and this is kind of troublesome. Kyogre Zacian having a 60% win rate means that it's just really, really strong and kind of oppressive. Um, I think that's going to be what the big driving factor is can your team beat Zacian Kyogre going into Worlds? And if you have a good matchup for that, you better hope you can outplay your opponent as well, because the team is just really consistent and really hard to beat. Um, like, you have positive matchups into Groudon, you have positive matchup into Trick Room, you have positive matchup into Yveltal, you have positive matchups into Lunaludon most of the time. So I believe Kyogre Zacian is going in as the team to beat, especially after seeing these stats from here. Um, Definitely look into Worlds. Definitely look into, when you're doing your planning, have a plan to beat Kyogre Zacian. Swordfish, again, it was the scary from the. It's been scary since the start of the format. Um, I don't know if you've been living under a rock. I guess you might have missed it, but don't sleep on it now. If you want a consistent team for Worlds, Kyogre Zacian's probably the way to do it. And then I guess usage stats just falls off a cliff here. Because Zacian Kyogre is so popular and so powerful, the next highest usage stat is Trick Room at just under 10%, under half of what the Kyogre Zacian is doing, which goes to show just how strong it is. But also, the win rate tanks hard for this type of team. Like I mentioned before, like, something is going on with these Trick Room teams to where their win rate is in the tank and not doing too well, and they're getting really terrible results for some reason. It might be that since it's a global event, that people from other regions have very good matchups and know how to play against these Trick Room teams. I know NA personally has been really popularizing these Trick Room modes and whatnot for teams, but we don't see it too much outside of that. And this might be the reason why. It might be just because places and other places in the world can just beat the team easily. They just somehow have a magic beat the Trick Room button. I'm not sure. Not without watching a lot of these matches and going back and covering it all, but I know the whole reason to why Trick Room is doing so poorly right now. Rattling off the next couple Zacian pairings here, they're all about 6% usage. Zacian Groudon, Zacian Calyrex Shadow Rider, Zacian Yveltal. These are, I think these are all just worst versions compared to Zacian Kyogre. Um, they all kind of are hovering about the same win rate too, which is kind of interesting, I guess. All in that 40-45% range. I think you could just, if you're going to play Zacian, just play Zacian Kyogre at this point. Zacian Yveltal doesn't offer anything crazy that Zacian Kyogre's not doing. Zacian Calyrex Shadow Rider is very hyper offensive, and I don't know if you want to be doing that going into Worlds right now with everything being super bulky. But when we get to some of the later things that we're going to talk about, I do think Calyrex Shadow Rider is poised to do really well. It's just going to take maybe some innovation from some players' parts to make it click. Let's keep on the Calyrex Shadow Rider plan. Talking about these Calyrex plus Weather duos. Calyrex Groudon. What the heck is going on here? Only a 3% usage rate, but the win rate is like tanked out the bottom, and this would probably be the reason why Groudon has such a low win rate. If it's being paired with Calyrex Shadow Rider and just losing like 70% of the time, that's why Groudon looks so bad on that sheet. And this would be the reason. This is where like causation comes into play here. Groudon's not bad, it's the pairing that's bad, right? Like, we see Lunala Groudon pretty much doing the same kind of stuff. You have Ghost Psychic with Groudon, and it's at 70% win rate almost. That's the highest win rate of all of the Pokemon pairings here, and it's doing fantastically, whereas Calyrex Shadow Rider Groudon just isn't. And I think that just comes down to maybe how these games are being played. I'm not sure if just Calyrex Shadow Rider just doesn't mesh well with the Groudon archetype. Like I mentioned, you want to bring Groudon plus Sun stuff. Calyrex needs its own support to really shine and do well, whereas Lunala doesn't always need that. Shadow Shield as an ability is really good at just making sure you don't die on turn 1, whereas Calyrex Shadow Rider, like, everyone's built to beat that kind of stuff and go fast and outspeed it all the time. Calyrex Kyogre, however, this pairing seems interesting, in my opinion. This would be on par with, like, maybe Kyogre Yveltal. My issue is you are very like special heavy this way, so the rest of your team needs to kind of pick up the physical end of the deal. And like you're playing like Incineroar, Rillaboom probably to finish out your Fire, Water, Grass core. You might be playing like Thundurus in your slot there to be your Dynamax target because you don't really want to Dynamax either of these 100% of the time. You definitely can Dynamax Kyogre a lot if you want to, but it's cool to see that something with low percentage like this is just coin flips. And it makes a huge difference looking at this compared to looking at the Groudon Calyrex Shadow team over here next to it at the same usage, right? Um, I feel like with Kyogre Calyrex, you're inclined to not have to have as many like weather abusers compared to Sun. Like Groudon sets Sun, but Groudon doesn't really get to abuse Sun, so you always have to bring something that abuses Sun, whether it be Zard or Venu. Whereas Kyogre, being that water type, gets to abuse its weather, and I think that's just where the design versus function comes into play here. It's really really cool though. I'm interested in seeing what that archetype can do moving into Worlds and how it can change and adapt to maybe even beat the other Rain team in Zacian Kyogre. I'm gonna talk about this last one here. I saved the best for last because this is something we hadn't seen at all in the last however many months since the early start of 12, and that's Solgaleo Kyogre. Solgaleo isn't the greatest restricted in my opinion. I feel like you can do much better things with a ton of different Pokemon. There's a reason Zacian Kyogre is the most popular one, right? Like, Zacian Kyogre is really, really good because Zacian's just a really good powerhouse. You're not, like, forced to Dynamax anything in particular, whereas Solgaleo Kyogre is, you have to Dynamax this, you can't really do anything else with Solgaleo otherwise. I think Sunsteel Strike is really, really cool, and it's really, really powerful, but I feel like you're not going to be as flexible as these other teams playing Solgaleo, right? Solgaleo loses fairly hard to any kind of like status condition, which is super popular right now. Will-O-Wisp, T-Wave, things like that. Yawn, all that good stuff. As the prominent Yveltal player, I know Yveltal can just destroy these teams in a heartbeat. Like you Dynamax your Solgaleo, activate your policy, foul play, you're dead. It's just that simple. And then Yveltal also boasts a decent matchup into Kyogre, and so you just really struggle, and you have to play other Pokemon. And if you're having to Dynamax things besides your Solgaleo to win games, why did you bring Solgaleo in the first place, right? Why didn't you just bring Zacian? Why didn't you play Dialga? I think Dialga Kyogre is a better combo than Solgaleo Kyogre. Part of that's a little bit of bias because I really like Dialga Kyogre together, but I just really don't like Solgaleo in this format right now. Being forced to Dynamax is never a good thing, and I think Lunala is the better Sun Moon restricted right now compared to Solgaleo. And that's all I got this week. I hope everyone gets to watch this before they leave for Worlds. That way they're not scrambling to team build and or make changes to their teams before leaving. I wish everyone happy and safe travels to London this next week. I know a lot of people are leaving early because there's a lot of travel issues going on right now, flights being canceled, train strikes, all that. So please be safe on your way to Worlds if you're going. Again, make sure to do all that fun YouTube stuff for us. Like, comment, subscribe, answer our question of the day down below. It'll be pinned down there. And yeah, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at in the world. We will see you all, I believe, Monday is when the next time I'll be on here for the podcast episode. Bye, everyone.